Have you ever felt so broken by betrayal that you thought you'd never stand tall again? What if the moment you were supposed to shatter was actually the beginning of your rise? Stay with us for a story of love, lies, and the incredible power of a woman who refused to be erased. The Beverly Hills Hotel had never looked more dazzling. The grand ballroom glowed with golden chandeliers, their crystal prisms scattering light over marble floors polished to a mirror's gleam. White roses cascaded from towering vases, their scent mingling with the sharper perfume of ambition and money. Every chair was draped in silk. Every flute of champagne poured with precision. To the guests who filled the room, tonight was the pinnacle of elegance, the crowning moment of Ryan Mitchell's life. He was marrying his mistress, Vanessa Brooks, in front of a crowd of investors, celebrities, and society's most glittering elite. But in the shadows of that glitter stood Emily Carter. Her presence was not meant to be noticed. She was not on the guest list. No one expected her to be here. She stood near the back of the ballroom, a simple dress hanging off her slender frame, her hands folded protectively over the swell of her belly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. This was not just any wedding. This was the wedding of her ex-husband, the man she had loved, trusted, and carried a child for, now parading his betrayal under chandeliers and camera flashes. The sound of laughter rolled across the hall. Ryan stood at the altar, his tuxedo sharp, his grin sharper. He raised a glass to his guests, his hand never leaving Vanessa's waist. Vanessa, draped in diamonds, glowed under the spotlight. Her gown clung to her like liquid silver, and she looked every bit the queen she longed to be. Together, they were the perfect picture of triumph, wealth, and cruelty. Emily felt the sting of every whisper around her. "Isn't that his ex-wife?" one woman murmured behind a manicured hand. "Pregnant, too. How pathetic. She should have stayed home. What is she even doing here?" Emily bit her lip, holding back tears. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of him. But seeing Ryan slide a ring onto Vanessa's finger sent a shiver through her soul. It was only months ago he had slid that same hand over her stomach, whispering promises of forever. Now he stood under a canopy of roses, declaring his love to another woman, as if Emily and the life inside her were mistakes he could erase. Her mind spiraled back to the day he had left. The arguments, the late nights, the perfume on his shirts that wasn't hers, the growing coldness in his eyes. She had begged him to stay, pleaded for their baby, for their vows. He had laughed, and told her she was nothing but a weight dragging him down. Vanessa was younger, hungrier, and Ryan wanted a woman who made him look powerful, not one who reminded him of his failures. And so, Emily had been discarded. Left to carry her child alone, left to scrape together a living, left to pick up the shattered pieces of a life she once believed was perfect. Tonight, those pieces cut deeper. Tonight, she wasn't just a broken woman. She was a spectacle, a ghost haunting a party that wanted her erased. The music swelled and applause filled the air as the priest pronounced them husband and wife. Ryan dipped Vanessa into a dramatic kiss, the flash of cameras exploding like fireworks. Guests cheered, their voices rising in celebration. It was a theater of triumph, and Ryan was the star of the show. Emily felt her knees weaken. She stumbled, clutching a chair for support. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear into the night and never be seen again. But some force, some stubborn ember inside her, rooted her to the spot. She had to see this through. She had to face the man who had humiliated her, even if it tore her apart. The applause died down, replaced by the buzz of conversation, the clink of glasses, the orchestra shifting to a waltz. Ryan and Vanessa began their first dance, spinning across the floor in a haze of champagne and arrogance. Emily stood frozen, her nails digging into her palms until she realized Ryan's eyes were on her. He had seen her. For a moment, his grin faltered. Then it returned wider, sharper, crueler. He whispered something into Vanessa's ear, and she laughed, throwing her head back as though mocking Emily directly. Ryan turned, guiding Vanessa toward the crowd of investors, and raised his voice so it carried across the ballroom. "Some women don't know when to let go," he announced, his gaze locked on Emily. The crowd followed his eyes. Dozens of heads turned, whispers rippled like a storm through the room. Vanessa smirked, her diamond earrings flashing. "Pathetic, really," Ryan added, his hand stroking Vanessa's arm. "Clinging to the past instead of accepting reality." The words sliced through Emily like glass. Her face burned as all eyes drilled into her. Some pitied, most mocked. She felt like she was drowning, the walls of the grand ballroom closing in. And then it happened. A sound cut through the air. Low and powerful engines. Not the hum of the valet outside, but a roar. Deep, commanding, unmistakable. Heads turned toward the tall windows of the ballroom. A line of sleek black cars rolled into the driveway, their tinted windows glinting under the lights. Guests murmured, their curiosity rising. Ryan paused mid-laugh, his brow furrowing. Vanessa clutched his arm, her smile flickering with unease. Emily turned slowly, her breath catching. The cars stopped in perfect unison, their engines purring like panthers. The ballroom doors shuddered as the first car's door opened. A tall figure in a black suit stepped out, the kind of presence that could silence a room without saying a word. The murmurs turned into a hush. The figure walked with purpose, bodyguards flanking him like shadows. His eyes scanned the room, sharp and unyielding, until they found Emily. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer alone. Every guest felt it. Ryan felt it most of all. His smirk froze, his hand tightening on Vanessa's as though bracing himself, because the man who had just arrived wasn't just anyone. He was Alexander Blackwood, the reclusive billionaire whose name alone carried weight heavier than fortunes, whose presence could undo men like Ryan with a single word. And he had come for Emily. The ballroom held its breath as Alexander Blackwood stepped inside, his gaze fixed on the trembling woman at the back of the room. Before she was the trembling figure in the back of a glittering ballroom, Emily Carter had been just a woman with simple dreams. She never chased diamonds, never cared for chandeliers, never measured her worth in the shine of expensive cars or the applause of strangers. What she wanted was small, but to her, it meant everything: a warm home, a loving husband, children who would grow up feeling safe, and a life where love mattered more than money. Emily was 32, but life had carved deeper lines in her heart than most women her age. Born in a modest suburb outside Chicago, she was the daughter of a mechanic and a school librarian. Her parents taught her that kindness was wealth, that honesty was treasure, and that respect was worth more than any bank account. She grew up in a little house where the furnace rattled in winter and summers meant sticky lemonade on the porch. There was no luxury, no grandeur, just love and effort. That was enough for her. Her passion had always been art. From the moment she could hold a pencil, Emily was sketching flowers, faces, the curves of the world around her. Her teachers pushed her toward scholarships, and with persistence, she managed to attend a state university. She majored in fine arts and education, eventually becoming a teacher at a small community school. Her students adored her. She had a way of seeing the beauty in even the messiest finger paintings, a way of reminding children that their creativity mattered. That was the woman Ryan Mitchell had met. He had walked into her life like a storm wearing a suit. Ryan, with his bright smile, polished shoes, and smooth voice, had seemed like everything Emily wasn't. Where she was humble, he was ambitious. Where she was content with simplicity, he craved more, always more. And yet, he made her laugh. He made her feel seen. He told her she was special, that her quiet grace was exactly what his chaotic world needed. When he proposed, Emily believed in him completely. Their wedding wasn't extravagant. It was held in a modest church with her mother's borrowed veil and her father's proud tears. Emily remembered the way Ryan had looked at her that day, as though she were the only woman in the world. She thought love like that was unbreakable. For years, she devoted herself to him. She left behind opportunities to move to bigger cities, choosing instead to support Ryan as he climbed his career ladder in finance. She worked late hours grading art projects while waiting for him to come home. She budgeted every grocery list so he could wear the suits that impressed his colleagues. She told herself it was teamwork, that their sacrifices would someday bloom into the future they both wanted. But slowly, something shifted. Ryan's eyes began to wander. His laughter no longer rang in their small apartment, but at restaurants she couldn't afford to enter. Emily noticed perfume on his shirts that wasn't hers. She noticed the way he rolled his eyes when she talked about her students, as if her world was small compared to his. Still, she clung to hope. She believed her love could fix what was breaking. And when she found out she was pregnant, her hope soared. Surely, she thought, this child would bring them back together. Surely, Ryan would soften again, remember the vows they had whispered under church rafters. She placed his hand over her belly one night and whispered, "This is our fresh start." Ryan smiled, but it wasn't warmth she saw in his eyes. It was calculation. The unraveling came faster than she expected. Arguments replaced laughter. He accused her of holding him back, of burdening him with a life he no longer wanted. She begged him to stay, begged him to think of their baby. But Ryan had already found his escape, Vanessa Brooks, young, glittering, ruthless. Where Emily offered loyalty, Vanessa offered glamour. Where Emily offered patience, Vanessa offered ambition. And Ryan chose her. One night, he packed his bags. His words burned into Emily's memory. "You'll never survive without me. You're just a teacher with a baby. Vanessa makes me look like a king. You make me look ordinary." He left, and just like that, Emily's world collapsed. She had no fortune to fall back on. No mansion, no trust fund. She returned to her small rented apartment, clutching ultrasound pictures as if they were life rafts. Her friends tried to console her, but betrayal this deep left wounds that no kind words could soothe. Every night she sat alone, one hand on her belly, whispering promises to her unborn child. "I'll protect you. I'll love you enough for two." But inside, Emily battled fears that clawed at her. How would she raise a child alone? How could she pay for diapers and hospital bills on a teacher's salary? What if Ryan was right? What if she really was nothing without him? The months passed in a haze of exhaustion and quiet despair. She went to doctor's appointments alone, staring at waiting rooms full of couples, her throat tight with envy. She watched Ryan's name climb higher in business magazines, his smile flashing beside Vanessa's at charity events. Each headline felt like salt on her wounds. She wondered how the world could praise a man who abandoned his wife and unborn child. When the wedding invitation leaked onto social media, Emily thought it was a cruel joke. She wasn't invited. Of course, she wasn't supposed to exist anymore. But curiosity, pain, and some deep need for closure pulled her to the Beverly Hills Hotel on that fateful night. She told herself she just wanted to see him one last time, to confirm that he was truly gone from her life. She didn't dress like the others. No couture gown, no diamonds, no glamorous hair, just a plain dress, a pair of worn heels, and the weight of her child pressing gently beneath her ribs. She walked into that ballroom alone, her heart pounding, her mind whispering that she shouldn't be there. And yet, she stayed, watching the man she once loved slide a ring onto another woman's finger. Every cruel whisper from the crowd, every mocking laugh from Vanessa, every arrogant smirk from Ryan sliced deeper. Still, Emily stood her ground. She wouldn't let them see her break. She wouldn't give Ryan the satisfaction of proving him right. But as the humiliation reached its peak, as Ryan's voice boomed across the room, calling her pathetic. Emily felt something inside her fracture. Her knees shook. The room blurred. She thought she might collapse under the weight of shame and sorrow. And then, just as she turned toward the exit, she heard it, the low growl of engines rolling into the driveway. She froze, her hand trembling on the door. Guests gasped, voices rising in confusion. Emily turned back, her breath caught in her throat as a line of black cars pulled up outside the hotel, their doors opening one by one. The Beverly Hills Hotel had always been a symbol of wealth and power. But that night, it became something else entirely. A stage for betrayal, humiliation, and the kind of spectacle only the rich could afford. The grand ballroom looked like a cathedral built to worship money. Every corner glistened. The chandeliers dripped with thousands of crystals reflecting golden light across the polished marble floors. Waiters in white gloves glided between tables carrying silver trays stacked with caviar, champagne, and hors d'oeuvres so delicate they looked more like jewelry than food. At the center of it all stood the altar. It wasn't a church altar, of course. It was a designer creation draped in thousands of imported roses, their petals so perfect they almost looked fake. The scent was overwhelming, sweet and heavy, filling the air until every breath tasted like money. A string quartet played from the corner, their bows slicing through violins with the precision of soldiers. The music was elegant, but beneath it ran a hum of whispered gossip, laughter too loud, and the constant clicking of cameras. The guests matched the extravagance of the hall. Every man wore a tuxedo so sharp it could cut glass. Every woman was draped in gowns worth more than most families' homes. Diamonds sparkled like stars around slender necks and wrists. The crowd wasn't just wealthy. They were predators. Investors, CEOs, politicians, influencers, people who lived for power, who could destroy reputations with a single phone call. And tonight, they gathered not for charity, not for love, but to celebrate the union of Ryan Mitchell and Vanessa Brooks, the golden couple, the scandal-turned fairy tale. Ryan basked in it. He had always loved the stage, and this wedding was his masterpiece. Standing at the altar in his tailored black tux, he looked every inch the conquering king. His dark hair was styled to perfection, his smile wide, his voice booming as he greeted each guest like they were old friends. Every laugh was calculated, every handshake a transaction. He thrived on being the center of attention. Vanessa was the jewel at his side. Her silver gown shimmered under the lights, clinging to her curves like liquid metal. The diamonds in her ears and hair caught the light with every move she made. She laughed loudly, too loudly, but no one corrected her. Tonight, she was Ryan's queen, his prize, his proof that he had upgraded. She clung to him with the desperation of someone who knew her place at the top was only secure as long as she kept his attention. Emily stood at the far edge of the ballroom, and to her, it felt like another planet. She didn't belong in this glittering world, and she knew it. Her plain dress looked dull compared to the sequined gowns around her. The shoes she wore pinched her swollen feet, but they were the only pair she owned that looked remotely formal. Her hair was pulled back simply, her makeup minimal. She looked like a shadow among stars, and the whispers confirmed it. She's here at his wedding. God, how humiliating. Pregnant, too. Poor thing. Or maybe pathetic. Emily pressed her hands over her belly as if shielding her child from the cruelty. She reminded herself she hadn't come to compete with them, hadn't come to prove anything. She had come because she needed to see Ryan for who he truly was. Needed the final nail in the coffin of her marriage. But knowing that didn't make the sting any less sharp. The ballroom seemed to close in on her. Every surface gleamed. Every smile hid a sneer. She moved quietly, almost invisibly through the crowd, sipping water while others drowned themselves in champagne. She caught fragments of conversations, deals, investments, gossip about who was sleeping with whom. It wasn't love that filled this room. It was performance. And at the center of it all, Ryan strutted like the king of a false empire. When the ceremony began, the orchestra swelled. The guests rose, turning toward the glittering doors. Vanessa entered on the arm of an older man, a famous investor, one of Ryan's allies. Her gown flowed behind her like a river of silver. The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed so rapidly it looked like lightning inside the ballroom. Vanessa beamed under the attention, her lips painted in a victorious smile. Ryan took her hand at the altar. His eyes flicked across the crowd until they landed on Emily. For a heartbeat, something passed across his face: hesitation, discomfort, but it vanished quickly, replaced by a smug grin. He wanted her to see this. He wanted her to hurt. The vows were empty words, scripted and rehearsed. Ryan promised loyalty to the woman he had betrayed Emily with. Vanessa promised love, her voice trembling with glee more than sincerity. The crowd sighed at all the right moments, some dabbing at dry eyes with silk handkerchiefs, others nodding with satisfaction. To them, this was entertainment, a show of power disguised as romance. And then the moment came. The priest pronounced them husband and wife. Ryan dipped Vanessa into a kiss so theatrical it belonged in a movie. The crowd erupted in applause, champagne glasses clinking in celebration. Emily's chest tightened. She told herself she wouldn't cry, but the tears burned anyway, threatening to fall. She turned slightly, her hand gripping the back of a chair to steady herself. Her legs trembled, her stomach clenched, and for a moment she thought she might faint. The first dance began. Ryan and Vanessa moved across the floor, their bodies pressed together, their smiles shining for the cameras. Guests swayed with the music, clapping politely, pretending this was love when it was nothing more than a contract. Then Ryan's eyes found Emily again. This time, he didn't look away. He whispered into Vanessa's ear and she laughed, her head tilting back, her smirk sharp as a knife. Ryan raised his voice loud enough to cut across the music. "Some people just don't know when to let go," he said. The crowd followed his gaze. Dozens of heads turned toward Emily. "Pathetic, really," he added, holding Vanessa tighter. Clinging to the past instead of facing reality. Laughter rippled through the ballroom. Emily's cheeks flamed. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the marble floor. But something inside her refused to break. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, even as her heart cracked wide open. The room seemed to spin. The chandeliers blurred. The music throbbed in her ears. The whispers stabbed like needles. She thought she couldn't take another second. She thought this was the end of her endurance. And then it happened. From outside, the deep growl of engines cut through the music. Low, powerful, unmistakable. The walls seemed to vibrate with the sound. Heads turned toward the tall windows as beams of headlights swept across the glass. A line of black cars rolled into the driveway, sleek and commanding. They weren't just vehicles. They were a statement. Tinted windows reflected the golden lights of the hotel, their engines purring in perfect unison. Gasps filled the ballroom. The music faltered. Even Ryan's confident grin slipped. Vanessa's hand tightened on his arm. The predators in the room smelled something new, something bigger, something dangerous. Emily turned slowly, her breath catching in her throat. She didn't know why, but her heart told her that everything was about to change. The ballroom door shuddered as the first car's door opened, and the crowd froze, waiting to see who had arrived. The applause still echoed when Ryan Mitchell raised his glass of champagne. His smile stretched wide, polished, triumphant, as if the world had finally bent to his will. Around him, the ballroom buzzed with admiration. Guests clinked glasses, whispered about his charm, about his upgrade from a quiet school teacher to a dazzling young socialite. Ryan soaked it all in. Every laugh, every admiring glance, every flash of a camera was fuel to his ego. To the crowd, Ryan looked untouchable. But beneath the mask of charm was a man who thrived on control and cruelty. Power wasn't enough for him. He wanted dominance. It wasn't enough to marry Vanessa. He needed to make sure Emily, his ex-wife, was crushed beneath the weight of his success. He spotted her again, standing near the back, her plain dress and pale face stark against the sea of glitter. She looked like an intruder in his kingdom, and he hated her for it. In his mind, Emily was a reminder of his humble beginnings, the version of himself he had outgrown. He wanted her erased, forgotten. But if she dared to appear in his world again, he would make an example of her. He leaned down to Vanessa, whispering words that made her throw back her head and laugh. Her laughter rang sharp, slicing through the music, drawing eyes toward Emily once again. Vanessa thrived on cruelty the same way Ryan did. She had won and she wanted the whole room to see her victory. Isn't she pathetic? Vanessa purred loud enough for those nearby to hear. Still following you around like a lost puppy. Ryan smirked, raising his voice deliberately. Some people don't know when to move on, he said. Some people can't accept reality. The crowd chuckled. A few shook their heads. Others leaned closer to hear more. Gossip was the lifeblood of this room, and Ryan knew exactly how to feed it. Honestly, Ryan continued, his voice dripping with false pity. I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. But you can't hold on to dead weight forever. You trade up or you get left behind. He squeezed Vanessa's hand, flashing his grin like a weapon. Emily's cheeks burned, her body trembling as the words hit her like knives. She wanted to turn away, to walk out, but her feet felt rooted to the marble. Each laugh around her was another shove, another reminder that she was standing alone in a room designed to humiliate her. Vanessa wasn't finished. She turned, her silver gown shimmering, her diamond earrings flashing, and locked eyes with Emily. I hope you're enjoying the show, she said sweetly, venom laced in every syllable. You should take notes. This is what real love looks like. The cruelty was deliberate, rehearsed. Vanessa wanted Emily to feel small, to feel erased. She wanted to cement her place as Ryan's queen by crushing the woman he had discarded. Ryan pulled Vanessa close, his voice booming once more for everyone to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight isn't just about love. It's about knowing your worth. And I finally found mine. The crowd applauded, some raising glasses, others exchanging sly glances. The humiliation was complete. Emily stood like a ghost in the back of the room, tears burning her eyes but refusing to fall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She wouldn't let them see her break, but inside she was unraveling. Her chest ached, her throat tight, her stomach knotted with the weight of every cruel word. Her hand rested protectively over her belly, whispering silently to her unborn child, hold on. Just hold on. Ryan, however, felt unstoppable. He strutted across the floor, pulling Vanessa into the spotlight. He introduced her to investors, kissed her hand for the cameras, laughed loudly enough to echo across the hall. Each gesture was a performance. Each glance at Emily another dagger. He wanted her broken, wanted her to leave with nothing but shame. Vanessa played her role flawlessly. She clung to Ryan, fluttered her lashes at powerful men, boasted about their honeymoon in the Maldives. She leaned into Emily's line of sight, tilting her head against Ryan's shoulder as though daring her to look away. The guests fed off it. Some pitied Emily quietly, others mocked her openly. What did she expect? One whispered. She was never in his league. Look at her. She doesn't belong here. Every whisper pressed harder against Emily's heart. She stood straighter, tried to steady her breath, but the humiliation weighed like chains. Ryan raised his glass again, his grin shark-like. To moving forward, he declared. To better choices, to women who deserve to stand by our side. The room erupted in cheers. Glasses clinked, cameras flashed. Vanessa kissed him on the cheek, her smile sharp with victory. And Emily, standing alone, finally felt her strength slip. Her knees buckled, her vision blurred. She thought she might collapse right there in front of them all. The final triumph for Ryan and Vanessa. She turned, desperate to leave, desperate to escape the suffocating room before she crumbled completely. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the stares, the whispers, the smirks. She reached the edge of the ballroom, her hand pressed against the heavy doors, her body trembling with exhaustion and grief. And then the sound, it came again, louder this time. Engines low, powerful, commanding. The ballroom trembled with it. Heads turned toward the windows, conversations dying mid-sentence. The laughter stopped. Even Ryan's grin faltered, uncertainty flickering across his face. The door shuddered as the first black car stopped outside, its headlights slicing through the night. The crowd held its breath. Vanessa's hand tightened on Ryan's arm. Emily froze, her hand still on the door. Something in the air shifted. The humiliation, the cruelty, the whispers, all of it seemed to pause, suspended in anticipation. The first door of the sleek black car opened, and the entire ballroom turned to see who had arrived. The roar of engines outside had unsettled the room, but as quickly as it had arrived, the moment dissolved into whispers. The cars idled in the driveway, their presence looming, but unexplained. And inside the ballroom, Ryan seized the distraction to reclaim control. "See," he boomed, raising his glass once more. "Even the city itself pauses for us tonight." Laughter scattered through the crowd, not quite as loud as before, but obedient enough to soothe his ego. Vanessa leaned in, her lips brushing his ear, her giggle sharp and triumphant. Emily still stood at the edge of the room, her hand pressed against the ballroom doors, desperate to leave, but her feet refused to move. Her heart told her to escape, but some stubborn ember inside her refused to let Ryan's last words, pathetic dead weight, be the closing chapter of her story. She turned back slowly, drawing shallow breaths, trying to steady the storm inside her chest. But she had walked straight into the cruelest moment of the night. The MC stepped forward, his voice booming through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention tonight, the newlyweds would like to invite a few special guests to say a few words." Emily froze. She knew where this was going before it even began. Ryan's smirk confirmed it. He wanted one final performance, one final blow. "Emily Carter," Ryan called out, his voice slick with mockery. "Why don't you join us?" The crowd gasped. Some stifled laughs, others turned eagerly, hungry for drama. Emily shook her head, her throat tight. "No," she whispered, though no one could hear. Ryan gestured grandly toward her, forcing the spotlight across the ballroom. "Don't be shy," he taunted. "You came all this way. At least give us your blessing." Her stomach twisted, her legs trembled. She wanted to run, but the weight of 100 eyes pinned her in place. The whispers swelled. "Is he serious? Oh my God, he's going to humiliate her. Poor thing." With every passing second, the silence became unbearable. At last, Emily forced herself forward, each step heavy as stone. She walked toward the center of the ballroom, her plain dress stark under the lights, her hand resting protectively on her belly. She felt exposed like prey surrounded by wolves. When she reached the stage, Ryan extended the microphone, his grin wide and merciless. Vanessa leaned into his side, her eyes sparkling with cruel delight. "Go on," Ryan urged. "Say something." Emily's throat burned. Words tangled in her chest. She opened her mouth, but only silence came out. A ripple of laughter spread across the crowd. Her humiliation thickened, suffocating. Vanessa seized the moment. "Look at her," she said loudly, her voice pitched to carry. Still clinging, still hoping. It's almost tragic. Almost. The laughter grew louder. Ryan chuckled, pretending to console his new wife. Don't be too harsh, darling. Some people just don't understand what it means to lose gracefully. The crowd erupted. Some laughed openly, others shook their heads, but not one voice rose in defense of Emily. She stood frozen under the lights, her cheeks burning, her heart shattering. The humiliation was complete. Every whisper, every sneer pressed down like chains. She wasn't just abandoned. She was ridiculed, discarded in front of the very world that once toasted her as Ryan's wife. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She forced her chin up, desperate to salvage an ounce of dignity. I only came, she whispered, her voice cracking, to wish you both the happiness you deserve. The words were barely audible, but they were enough to ignite another wave of laughter. Vanessa clapped mockingly, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Bravo! What a performance! Ryan leaned close to the microphone, his grin sharp as glass. You hear that, everyone? My ex-wife wishes us well. Isn't that sweet? His voice dripped with mockery, his eyes glinting with satisfaction. He had won. He had crushed her completely. Emily's chest heaved. The room tilted. Her knees weakened. She thought she might collapse right there under the chandeliers. Another piece of entertainment for the hungry crowd. And then, just as she swayed, just as the world threatened to fade, she heard it again. The engines outside, louder now, closer. The ballroom doors trembled under the weight of footsteps approaching. The MC stammered, his words faltering as the crowd turned. Murmurs rippled, heads craned toward the entrance. The laughter died, curiosity replacing cruelty. Ryan frowned, his grip tightening on Vanessa's hand. What the hell is going on? He muttered, his confidence wavering for the first time all night. The music stopped abruptly. The chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Even Emily, her body trembling with shame, felt a shift in the air. Something powerful, something unstoppable was about to break through the golden facade of this room. The doors creaked open. A shadow fell across the ballroom floor. And when the first figure stepped inside, the entire room fell silent, their gasps echoing like thunder in the stillness. The ballroom was frozen in silence, but Emily's world spun out of control. Every sound blurred into a ringing in her ears. Her chest rose and fell with frantic breaths. Her vision was swimming with the sting of unshed tears. The humiliation she had endured. The cruel laughter. Ryan's mocking voice. Each moment piled onto her shoulders until she thought she might break. Her body trembled. Her hand clutched at her belly. And for a terrifying second, she swayed so violently she thought she would fall. The crowd, hungry for spectacle, leaned forward, expecting her collapse. They wanted to see it, the final humiliation. The pregnant ex-wife fainting at her ex-husband's wedding. Emily forced herself upright, but the strength drained from her legs. She stumbled away from the stage, away from Ryan's smirk and Vanessa's mocking eyes, until she reached the edge of the ballroom again. Her breaths came shallow, ragged, her heart pounding against her ribs. She pushed through the doors at last, escaping into the corridor outside. The golden glow of the chandeliers faded into the cold, sterile light of the hallway. Here, away from the crowd, away from their laughter, the weight of everything crashed down on her. Her back pressed against the wall. She slid down until she sat on the carpet, her hands covering her face, and for the first time that night, she let herself cry. Not the silent tears she had hidden in the ballroom, but deep, aching sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for the love she had lost. She cried for the vows that had turned to ash. She cried for the child inside her who would never know the father's love she had once dreamed of giving them. She cried until the sound of her own voice startled her, echoing down the empty corridor. Her heart screamed questions she had no answers for. Why wasn't I enough? Why did he throw me away? What did I do wrong? Her mind replayed Ryan's words again and again. Dead weight, pathetic, ordinary. Each one stabbed deeper, convincing her that maybe he was right. Maybe she was nothing without him. She hugged her belly tighter, whispering through tears, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I thought I could give you a father, a family. I thought I could give you more." Her voice cracked. "But it's just us now. Just us." The despair wrapped around her like a shroud. In that moment, she felt smaller than she had ever felt in her life, invisible, forgotten. A ghost in the corridors of the powerful. From inside the ballroom, the muffled sound of music and laughter resumed. Ryan had moved on, celebrating with Vanessa, the crowd rallying around him again. Emily was nothing but a footnote in his story, discarded and erased. She pressed her hands over her ears, trying to block it out, but the sounds only made the emptiness sharper. She thought of running, of disappearing into the night, of never facing this cruel world again. She thought of how easy it would be to vanish, to slip out the back entrance, to never return. But then the baby kicked. It was a small movement, gentle but firm, a reminder that life still grew inside her. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her belly. The tears kept falling, but her breathing slowed. The child was real. The child needed her. She whispered again, her voice steadier this time. "I can't give up. Not now. Not when you need me." But the despair was not so easily shaken. Even as she clung to that thought, the reality pressed in. She had no money, no support, no place in this glittering world. She was a teacher with a broken heart carrying a child alone. Against men like Ryan, against women like Vanessa, what chance did she have? Her mind swirled with the cruel whispers she had overheard. She doesn't belong here. She looks pathetic. He traded up. Each one was a chain dragging her down. She closed her eyes, rocking back and forth, trying to quiet the storm inside. "I just need to get through tonight," she murmured. "Then we'll leave. We'll start over somewhere else, somehow." But even as she whispered the promise, doubt gnawed at her. Could she really start over? Could she really raise a child alone, with the weight of shame pressing on her every step? The corridor grew colder, the sounds of the ballroom more distant, as if she were sinking into another world entirely. She felt on the edge of surrender, ready to let despair swallow her whole. And then, footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, echoing down the hall. Not the hurried shuffle of a guest, not the click of a waiter's shoes. These steps carried weight, authority, command. Emily's tears slowed. She lifted her head, blinking through the blur. At the end of the corridor, shadows stretched long across the carpet. The air shifted, heavy with something she couldn't name. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with anticipation. Whoever it was, they weren't just another guest. The energy was different, commanding, undeniable. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until the golden light from the ballroom spilled across a figure emerging from the doorway. Emily's breath caught, and when she saw who it was, her tears froze. Her despair collided with a spark of something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. The footsteps echoed like thunder in the corridor. Emily wiped her face with the back of her hand, pushing herself upright against the wall. Her body trembled, but her eyes fixed on the figure emerging from the shadows. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit so perfectly tailored it looked like it had been sculpted onto him. His hair was dark, his jaw sharp, his presence commanding. Even from a distance, Emily recognized him. The world would have recognized him. Alexander Blackwood, the billionaire no one expected to see here. The man whose name carried weight heavier than fortunes, whose empire spanned industries and continents, the reclusive magnate who rarely appeared in public, let alone at a wedding like this. But Emily didn't just know him as a headline or a business legend. She knew him from a time long before his fortune became myth. Years ago, before Ryan, before the weight of betrayal crushed her spirit, Emily had volunteered at a community art program in the city. She had taught children from broken homes how to paint, how to express their stories through color. One night, she found a man standing quietly at the back of the studio, watching. He was younger then, not yet the titan he would become, but his eyes carried shadows. He told her later that he had been lost in his own world of pressure, teetering on despair. Her kindness, simple, unassuming, had reminded him of something he'd almost forgotten. Humanity. She never asked who he was, never pried, never treated him like a man with potential power. She just offered him a brush, told him to try. For the first time in years, he painted, he laughed, he felt alive again. Emily had never thought much of it afterward. To her, it was just another evening of doing what she loved. But to Alexander Blackwood, it had been a turning point. Now, standing in the corridor with his eyes locked on hers, Emily realized he hadn't forgotten. Her lips parted, but no words came. He stepped closer, his presence filling the space, his voice low but firm. Emily. Her name on his tongue was steady, grounding. She blinked through tears, uncertain if this was real. What? What are you doing here? She whispered. Instead of answering immediately, he reached into his pocket and offered her a handkerchief, crisp and white. She hesitated, then took it, dabbing at her wet cheeks. His gaze softened, but beneath it was steel. You shouldn't be standing out here alone, he said. Not tonight. Not ever. Before she could respond, the ballroom doors burst open again. Guests spilled into the corridor, their curiosity dragging them toward the commotion. The black cars idling outside had stirred whispers. And when they saw Alexander Blackwood standing beside Emily, those whispers turned into gasps. It's him. Blackwood. What is he doing here? The murmurs spread like wildfire. The orchestra inside faltered, notes stumbling as even the musicians turned to stare. Ryan appeared in the doorway, his arm around Vanessa. His confident grin wavered the moment his eyes landed on Alexander. His laughter died, replaced by something else, fear. Alexander Blackwood, Ryan said, forcing bravado into his tone. To what do we owe the surprise? Alexander didn't even glance at him. His attention remained on Emily, as though Ryan were nothing more than background noise. He lifted a hand, steadying her trembling shoulder. The gesture was protective, intimate, but above all, it was public. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The optics were undeniable. The discarded ex-wife, humiliated and mocked, now standing with one of the most powerful men in the world at her side. Emily tried to step back, overwhelmed, but Alexander's hand remained firm. No, he said softly, meant only for her. Don't hide. Not anymore. Vanessa's smile faltered. She tightened her grip on Ryan's arm. This is ridiculous, she hissed, though her eyes darted nervously between Emily and Alexander. Ryan forced a laugh louder than necessary. Come on, Alexander. You can't be serious. This woman, she's nothing. She's... Alexander's gaze finally turned to him, cold, piercing. The room seemed to freeze under its weight. Finish that sentence, he said calmly. And I'll make sure you never stand in a room like this again. The silence was suffocating. Ryan's mouth opened, then closed. The bravado drained from his face, replaced by panic. Alexander straightened, his voice carrying clearly now for every guest to hear. This woman, he said, his hand still steady on Emily's shoulder, is not nothing. She is more than any of you will ever deserve. The crowd erupted into murmurs. Phones lifted, capturing the moment. The narrative of the evening shifted instantly, like a wave crashing onto the shore. Emily wasn't the humiliated ex-wife anymore. She was the woman standing beside Alexander Blackwood. Emily's knees wobbled. Her heart pounded. She wanted to protest, to tell him she wasn't strong enough for this, but his presence anchored her. For the first time all night, she didn't feel alone. Ryan's face burned red. He tried to laugh again, but it came out strained. This is absurd. She's my ex-wife, for God's sake. She doesn't belong here. Alexander stepped closer to him, his voice dropping low. Dangerous. And yet, she belongs more than you ever did. Vanessa's nails dug into Ryan's arm. Ryan, do something, she hissed. But Ryan stood frozen, his power crumbling in the shadow of Alexander's presence. The ballroom buzzed louder, speculation rising. Some guests leaned in, eager to witness Ryan's downfall. Others whispered Emily's name as though trying to remember it, as though rewriting the story of who she was. Emily's heart swelled with something she hadn't felt in months. Vindication. She looked at Ryan, at the man who had discarded her, and for the first time, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. Alexander turned back to her, his expression softening again. You don't have to say anything, he murmured. Just stand tall. Let them see who you are. Her lips trembled. But who am I to them, she whispered. He leaned closer, his eyes unyielding. You are everything. Gasps rang again, the crowd hanging on every word. Ryan's fists clenched, his jaw tight, but he couldn't move. Vanessa's smile cracked into panic. The balance of power had shifted completely and everyone knew it. The air thickened, every breath in the room drawn sharp, every eye locked on the trio at the center of the storm. Emily felt the ground tilt, her despair colliding with a strange, soaring strength. She had come here broken, humiliated, convinced she was nothing. And now, standing beside Alexander Blackwood, she felt the first spark of who she truly was. And when Alexander reached for her hand and laced his fingers through hers, the entire ballroom erupted into chaos. The ballroom erupted the moment Alexander Blackwood laced his fingers through Emily's. Gasps collided with frantic whispers, and the flashes of phones lit up like lightning. The narrative had changed in an instant. A woman once mocked and humiliated now stood hand in hand with one of the most powerful men alive. Ryan's smug grin was gone, replaced by a mask of disbelief. Vanessa's eyes darted wildly, her nails biting into Ryan's arm as if clinging to the last shred of control. Around them, the guests shifted uneasily, their alliances recalculating in real time. Everyone in that room knew that the ground had just shifted. Emily, however, felt the weight of all those eyes pressing against her. Her first instinct was to shrink, to retreat into the shadows where she had survived for so long. But Alexander's grip was firm, steady, unyielding. His presence was a wall against the storm. Stand tall, he murmured softly, his voice only for her. This moment is yours. And for the first time in months, maybe years, Emily believed him. Alexander guided her out of the ballroom chaos, ignoring Ryan's sputtered protests. Cameras followed, voices rose, but his security flanked them seamlessly, creating a path. Emily stumbled once, overwhelmed, but Alexander steadied her. They emerged into a private lounge off the main corridor. The noise of the ballroom dulled behind closed doors, leaving Emily in a rare silence. She pressed a hand against her chest, trying to catch her breath. I can't do this, she whispered. They're all laughing at me. They always will. Alexander shook his head, his eyes burning with intensity. No, they'll remember tonight as the night everything changed. But only if you let yourself rise. She blinked at him, her voice small. Rise? I'm just me. You're not just anything, he said firmly. You've forgotten who you are, but I haven't. He gestured and two women entered. Stylists, elegant and efficient, carrying cases of gowns, brushes, and cosmetics. Emily froze. What is this? Alexander's lips curved into the faintest smile. It's time to remind them of the woman they underestimated. It's time to remind you. Her hands trembled as the women approached, but slowly she allowed them to work. The plain dress slipped away, replaced by fabric that shimmered like moonlight. A gown of deep emerald green was draped across her figure, cinching at her waist, flowing around her swollen belly in a way that celebrated, not concealed, her pregnancy. Her hair was swept back, curls cascading down her shoulders. Makeup brushed away the shadows of exhaustion, revealing the glow she thought she'd lost forever. When the stylist stepped back, Emily turned to the mirror. She gasped. The woman staring back at her was not the ghost who had walked into the ballroom. She wasn't the humiliated ex-wife hiding in shame. She wasn't the abandoned lover Ryan had discarded. She was radiant, powerful, whole. Her hand moved to her belly, her reflection shimmering with strength. For the first time, she saw herself not as broken, but as a mother, a survivor, a woman who had endured betrayal and still stood tall. Alexander stepped behind her, his reflection towering over hers. Do you see it now? He asked quietly. Emily swallowed hard, her eyes brimming with tears. But this time, they weren't tears of despair. I don't even recognize her. You should, Alexander said. Because that's who you've always been. You just forgot. Her lips trembled, but a small, almost defiant smile curved them. Maybe I did. He reached for her hand. It's time to show them. Her pulse raced as they returned to the ballroom. The noise hushed as the doors opened. Every head turned, every whisper died. Emily walked back into the golden glow. No longer a shadow, but a blaze of light. The emerald gown shimmered under the chandeliers, her posture straight, her chin lifted. Gasps rang out, followed by the frantic clicking of cameras. Ryan's face drained of color. What? What is this? He stammered. Vanessa's jaw dropped, her mocking smile gone, replaced by raw panic. She clutched Ryan's arm like a drowning woman clinging to driftwood. Emily met their eyes, and for the first time, she didn't look away. She didn't shrink. She didn't tremble. She simply stood, radiant, untouchable. The crowd buzzed louder, some already shifting allegiance, whispering about Emily's strength, her poise, her connection to Blackwood. The humiliation that had once defined her was erased, replaced by awe. Ryan stepped forward, his voice rising. This is a stunt. That's all this is. She doesn't belong here. She never did. Alexander's voice cut through the noise like steel. She belongs more than anyone else in this room. Gasps erupted. Phones captured every word, every glance. The story of the evening was no longer Ryan and Vanessa's wedding. It was Emily's rebirth. Emily's lips parted. She hadn't prepared a speech, hadn't planned to stand here. But the strength in Alexander's hand, the strength in her reflection carried her. She lifted her chin and spoke, her voice steady. You're right about one thing, Ryan, she said. I don't belong here. Not in your world of lies and cruelty. But that doesn't mean I don't belong anywhere. I do, and I will never let you define me again. The ballroom fell silent. Ryan's mouth opened, but no sound came. Vanessa's face twisted, her grip on him tightening in desperation. The crowd erupted, whispers turning to applause, cautious at first, then stronger. For once, Emily wasn't the spectacle of pity or scorn. She was the storm that had changed the room. Her heart pounded, but she didn't falter. She turned, her gown flowing like water, and met Alexander's gaze. His slight nod was all the affirmation she needed. For the first time since Ryan left, Emily felt powerful. Not because of Alexander, not because of the gown, but because she remembered her worth. And just as the applause reached its height, the ballroom doors slammed open again. A figure rushed in, clutching something in his hand, his face pale with panic. The man shouted across the room, "Stop everything. There's something you all need to see." The ballroom, already trembling with tension, froze when the man burst through the doors. His suit was wrinkled, his hair damp with sweat, and in his trembling hands, he clutched a stack of papers. His voice cracked as he shouted again, "Stop everything. You need to see this." The music cut off. Glasses clinked against tables as guests turned, eyes widening. Whispers swept the room like wildfire. Ryan's face paled and Vanessa's nails dug deeper into his arm. "Who is this?" Vanessa hissed. "What's going on?" The man staggered toward the stage, his breath ragged. He looked at Emily, then at Alexander, and finally fixed his gaze on Ryan. These are documents. Proof of everything he's done." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras lifted, ready to capture history. Ryan stepped forward, his voice booming with forced authority. "This is nonsense. Security, remove him." But the man didn't stop. He slapped the stack of papers onto the stage. Contracts, bank statements, photos, all spilling across the polished floor. Fraud, embezzlement, deals rigged with stolen money. It's all here. Ryan Mitchell is a liar and a thief. The ballroom erupted. Gasps turned into shouts. Some guests rose from their seats. Others leaned forward, hungry for details. The predators of high society had smelled blood. Ryan's mask cracked. His voice rose, desperate. "Lies. All lies. This is a setup." Alexander stepped forward, his voice calm but deadly. "Is it? Or is this the truth finally catching up to you?" The crowd shifted instantly, their eyes darting between Ryan and Alexander. And then Emily, standing radiant in her emerald gown, stepped into the light. For months, she had been silent, crushed beneath Ryan's betrayal. But tonight, she found her voice. She bent down, picking up one of the papers. Her hands trembled, but her voice rang clear. This is Ryan's signature. These dates, these numbers, they line up with the nights he told me he was working late. The nights I waited at home carrying his child, believing his lies. Gasps spread like thunderclaps. Guests whispered furiously, cameras flashing. Ryan lunged forward, his face contorted. "Shut up, Emily. You don't know what you're talking about." But she stood tall, her chin high. For the first time in her life, she wasn't shrinking. She wasn't afraid. "No, Ryan, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know you abandoned me. I know you humiliated me. And now everyone knows what else you've done." The applause began slowly. A few guests bold enough to clap at truth. Then more, louder, until the ballroom thundered with it. Not for Ryan, not for Vanessa, but for Emily, the woman who had been mocked, discarded, erased, now standing at the center of justice. Ryan's voice cracked as he shouted over the noise. "This is Blackwood's doing. He's using her to destroy me." Alexander's lips curved into a cold smile. "No, Ryan. You destroyed yourself. She's just the truth you couldn't silence." Vanessa's mask shattered. She tried to pull Ryan back, whispering frantic words, but the cameras caught everything. The panic, the desperation, the cracks in their carefully polished facade. The image of their power couple had crumbled in seconds. Emily's heart pounded, but she didn't falter. She looked directly at Vanessa, her voice steady. "You laughed at me. You called this love, but all you've built together is a lie, and lies always collapse. Vanessa's face twisted, her bravado gone. She stepped back as though the ground itself had betrayed her. The guests erupted again, their loyalty shifting completely. No one was laughing at Emily now. They were laughing at Ryan, at Vanessa, at the spectacle of their downfall. Ryan tried one last time, his voice breaking. "I made you. You'd be nothing without me." Emily lifted her chin, her emerald gown shimmering under the chandeliers. "No, Ryan, I was never nothing. I just forgot my worth. But tonight, I remember." The room thundered with applause. Some guests rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, their voices rising to drown Ryan's desperate protests. Security moved closer, waiting for Alexander's signal. Ryan's empire, his reputation, his marriage, all of it crumbled in real time before the eyes of the world. Emily's hand moved to her belly, her smile soft yet resolute. "And my child," she said, her voice carrying across the room, "will never grow up believing cruelty is strength. They'll know love. They'll know dignity. They'll know the truth." The crowd roared with approval. Phones captured every second. By morning, her words would be headlines. Ryan's face twisted, his hands shaking. "This isn't over," he shouted. "You'll regret this." Alexander stepped forward, his presence towering. "No, Ryan, you will." The ballroom fell into an awed silence. Security approached, placing firm hands on Ryan's shoulders. Vanessa pulled away, her eyes darting for an exit. Their empire of lies had collapsed in the most public way possible, and there was no hiding from it now. Emily exhaled, her shoulders trembling with release. For so long, she had carried pain in silence. Now at last, the silence was broken. But just as the applause swelled again, louder than ever, the man who had delivered the document stumbled forward once more. His face was pale, his voice shaking. "There's more," he gasped, holding up one last folder. "Something that changes everything, not just about Ryan, but about Emily, too." The room fell silent again, every head whipping toward Emily. Her chest tightened, her breath caught. And as the man opened the folder, Emily realized her battle wasn't over. It was only beginning. The ballroom that had once been filled with laughter and cruelty now held its collective breath. The man who had brought the evidence against Ryan lifted the final folder, his hands trembling as though he held fire itself. "This," he said, voice cracking, "isn't just about Ryan, it's about her." Every head turned toward Emily. She froze, her chest tight, her palms damp. For a moment, fear threatened to drag her back into the shadows. But Alexander's steady hand brushed against hers, grounding her. His calm, unshakable presence whispered, "You're not alone anymore." The man opened the folder, pulling out a single sheet of paper. Cameras zoomed in. Guests leaned forward, and Ryan let out a desperate laugh. "See, even she's not who you think she is. She's just as pathetic as I always said." The man ignored him. He turned, his voice clearer now. "This isn't shame. This is truth. Emily Carter, you are the rightful co-owner of Mitchell Holdings." The room erupted into chaos. Emily's eyes widened. "What?" she whispered. He held up the document for all to see. The original incorporation papers signed years ago when Ryan had first launched his company. Emily's name was right there next to his. Back then, he had convinced her to sign, telling her it was just paperwork. She hadn't realized that legally she was a founding partner. "You built this with him," the man continued. "And when he pushed you aside, he thought you'd never find out. But the truth is, you've had the legal right to half of everything from the start." Gasps echoed like thunderclaps. The guests, hungry for drama, now turned with awe toward Emily. Ryan's face went ghost white. He lunged forward, grabbing the paper. "That's fake. It's worthless. But Alexander's voice cut through like steel. "No, Ryan. I've seen enough contracts to know real ink from fake. And that," he nodded toward the paper, "is ironclad." Ryan staggered back, sweat breaking across his brow. Vanessa pulled away from him completely now, sensing the sinking ship she had tethered herself to. She looked at him with disgust, then slipped quietly toward the edge of the crowd, abandoning him. Emily's knees weakened, but this time not from despair, but from power, from truth. She had walked into this ballroom as nothing, as a ghost of a woman. Now she stood revealed as more than Ryan ever wanted her to be. His equal, his undoing. Her voice trembled at first, but then steadied, filling the golden hall. "All those years, you told me I was worthless. You told me I was nothing without you. But the truth is, I was part of this all along. You just tried to erase me." Ryan's face twisted. "You'll never get away with this. I'll fight you in court." "Oh," Alexander stepped closer, his presence towering. "You won't fight anything. By the time the sun rises, your name will be on every front page for fraud, theft, and betrayal. And hers," he glanced at Emily, his eyes softening, "will be remembered for strength." The crowd erupted in applause, louder than ever before. Guests who had mocked Emily hours earlier now stood and cheered. Phones captured her radiant figure in the emerald gown, her hand resting protectively on her belly, her chin lifted in quiet triumph. Ryan shouted, his voice drowned by the noise. Security finally stepped forward, gripping his arms. He thrashed, but the once powerful man was dragged through the same doors where he had strutted proudly hours earlier. His protests faded into the night, swallowed by the roar of engines from the waiting black cars. Vanessa vanished into the crowd, her glittering gown disappearing like smoke. Her empire of vanity had crumbled in minutes. And Emily stood tall. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not tears of despair. They were tears of release, of healing, of a woman finally free. She pressed her hand to her belly and whispered, "We did it. We're free." The applause swelled again. Some guests approached her offering respect, apologies, even admiration. But Emily wasn't listening to them. Her eyes found Alexander. He stepped forward, his gaze steady. "I told you," he said softly. "You are everything." She smiled through her tears. "I almost believed I was nothing. You reminded me." He shook his head. "No, you reminded yourself. I just stood beside you." The crowd slowly began to disperse, but the story of the night was already written. Emily Carter, the humiliated ex-wife, was now the woman who had stood in the fire and risen from the ashes. The whispers that once mocked her had turned into cheers. The humiliation that had once defined her was gone, replaced by dignity. Later, as the ballroom emptied and the chandeliers dimmed, Emily stepped outside. The night air was cool against her skin, the city lights glittering beyond. The black cars waited, engines purring softly. Alexander stood beside her, offering his arm. She looked at him, then down at her belly. For the first time in so long, the future didn't terrify her. It glowed. "You don't need to decide anything tonight," Alexander said gently. "But know this. You are not alone anymore." Emily exhaled, a smile breaking through. She felt lighter, freer, stronger. "For the first time, I believe that." Together, they stepped into the waiting car. The doors closed, the engine roared to life, and the convoy of black cars pulled away from the Beverly Hills Hotel. Inside the ballroom, guests would still be buzzing, phones still flashing with posts that would flood the world by morning. But Emily didn't care anymore. She wasn't living for their whispers. She was living for herself and for the child who would one day know that their mother stood tall when the world tried to break her. She looked out the window, her hand resting over her belly, her reflection glowing against the glass, and with quiet conviction, she whispered, "This is our new beginning." 3 years later, the sun streamed into a bright, airy art studio overlooking the ocean. Emily, no longer defined by her past, was now a celebrated artist, her paintings known for their vibrant hope and resilient beauty. Her laughter echoed in the room, mingling with the happy gurgles of her 2-year-old daughter, Lily, who was busy making a masterpiece of her own with finger paints. The door opened, and Alexander Blackwood walked in, his commanding presence softened by the adoring smile he saved only for her and Lily. He knelt, letting Lily smear blue paint on his expensive suit without a hint of concern. "I see you two are hard at work creating another treasure," he said, his eyes meeting Emily's over their daughter's head. The connection between them was no longer just a promise of support, but a deep, quiet love built on respect and shared healing. That night, they had reclaimed not only her company but her future. Emily transformed Mitchell Holdings, rebranding it and creating a foundation that sponsored art programs for underprivileged children just like the one where she and Alexander had first met. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a creator of second chances. As Alexander picked Lily up, Emily walked over and leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. The ghosts of the Beverly Hills Hotel were long gone, replaced by the warmth of a true home and the unwavering strength of a love she deserved. She had found more than justice. She had found peace, purpose, and a family built not on lies, but on truth. Her new beginning had blossomed into a beautiful life, proving that the deepest wounds can lead to the greatest strengths. Emily's journey from heartbreak to healing is a powerful reminder that we all have a deep well of strength inside us, waiting to be rediscovered. It's about finding the courage to rewrite our own stories, no matter what life throws at us. If her story moved you and gave you a sense of hope, please take a moment to click the like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and empower. By joining our community, you become part of a movement of people who believe in rising up, supporting one another, and finding the light, even in the darkest of times. Thank you for watching. Remember, you are stronger than you think, and you are never truly alone.